So last time I had begun to talk a bit about this book, Training in Compassion from Norman Fisher. And the book, as I'd said, is organized, is based on an old Tibetan text, but it's organized into slogans, kind of short, punchy phrases, a few words, the kinds of things that we might remember when we really need to remember something, And I'd commented that in my practice, and I think in a lot of people's practice, sort of like one of the very real material ways that practice manifests in our life, like one of the things where you can just see like, oh yeah, that's there because there's practice. One of the ways that it manifests is in the form of little mental notes, short sayings, a few words, a kind of, a memory that is, it's like we can actually bring the insight up. We can actually recall it in a deep way so that we can actually bring it to presence in a particular moment when we need it, when we have forgotten it. And what we find is that to suffer less means to remember more. It's like the Dharma comes to be closer and closer at hand. The liberating insights and ideas, memories that actually cut through suffering, those start to feel like maybe not quite at our fingertips, but close, nearby. And they take the form of like sometimes 2-word pep talk we give to ourselves. And we can't always remember, but our practice gains a kind of momentum so that stuff just kind of comes up. It just arises. And so this model of slogans, I think, is quite, feels alive and relevant to me. And I'll share a couple that are included in the book, but the encouragement is for each of us, in a way, to be kind of creating our own slogans. Like we each need our own particular pep talks at various times in the day, right? But they need to be good. They can't, right? Because when we're, there are going to be moments when you're going to want to give the finger to your little pep talk, right? Like these trainings, they have to actually be in the bones, and they have to feel really close to your heart. It has to be an insight that's seen again and again, and with a lot of feeling, actually. Like that's one of the characteristics of insight, is there's some rush of feeling that's associated with the clear seeing. Does that make sense? It's not just like you see something as this dry, intellectual, cognitive thing. It's like, no, I see that. I see what I'm doing. I see what I'm hanging on to. I see how I'm caught. And so in our practice and in our daily lives, we can actually look like what are the actual what slogans are my medicine. So the final slogan out of 59 is don't expect applause. Yeah. And I love that. After 58 slogans, right? After all this beautiful work, this kind of like heart opening, and they're not all. Some of them work against each other. It's like some of them push us this way, some push us this way. After all this work, don't expect applause. And I think it's relevant in a lot of ways, but there can be a way in which we're practicing and maybe not even realize it, but subtly we're waiting for applause. Right? You know that feeling of kind of like, I don't know who's gonna clap, but somebody better fucking clap. Right? And it's maybe just, sometimes it's our own idealism or our own sense of, where there's like some aspect of spectatoring, you know, where like we're watching ourselves in a way, and there's a certain sense of like, okay, I'm gonna do this practice, and but somebody, somewhere, please, some applause. And when practice feels like this, I think it can be a little like we don't always detect how tied to certain views of practice we are, or how we're still practicing in a little way like dependent on some form of approval, or it's like not our own kind of trust in our practice, in our heart, in the integrity of our intention. Like that's not always enough. Sometimes we need the external kind of validation of this is good, this works, I'm making progress, whatever it may be. So don't expect applause. Now, if in teaching, it's like this is not subtle, right? This is not subtle, because the sort of tides of praise and disparagement, and those tides just run through, you know, in a very consistent way through teaching, right? And in my own practice, and teaching is just like actually a small facet of my practice, but in my own teaching practice, my aspiration, which I don't feel like I've achieved, but my aspiration is to offer something with no strings attached. Like meaning that not just not expecting applause, but not needing anything. Just a very simple offering. Like you know when you get a gift where it's like the gift begins a kind of economy of debt and right? And that's not like the spirit of a true gift, right? But it's subtle. Like sometimes we give something, and there's just a little, it may be a very thin string, but there's some expectation. So what would it be to actually give without any expectation of applause or its variance? And there's so much, when people can do that, when people can really give without expecting applause of any kind, there's a kind of moral force to it. There's a sense of it actually frees up the person receiving something, because it can feel oppressive when somebody wants something from you, wants some form of appreciation or applause or something. And to give freely, to give with no strings attached, to not expect applause, real dignity. I saw this, I was just on retreat with 37 teenagers, age. Well, I really got some sympathy there. 37 teens, age 14 to 19. And there's a Spirit Rock teen retreat, and it's an annual thing, and it's like part meditation retreat. There are some hours of silence. We practice in silence for several hours a day. And then part kind of vaguely group therapy, sort of team building, lots of like sweet emotional exchanges between the teens. And then part summer camp. It's like on all those things sort of mixed together, right? And to manage, 35 or 40 teens, you need a lot of adults. And so there were 3 teachers, and but there were 13 staff members too. So it was 15 of us. We didn't have them outnumbered, but and the staff, the teachers receive dana from the families, from the parents. The staff come voluntarily, which is something that I did for a number of years, and they come voluntarily to serve, and it was a very beautiful thing to see them give in this, like hand outstretched, very no strings attached. And I think the teens actually can feel that, can appreciate the generosity of that offering. And it creates this kind of really almost like a field of permission and a field of dana, a field of generosity, of goodness, when we don't expect applause. And so on the last night, it was New Year's, on the last night, New Year's Eve, and so we stayed up till midnight, and it started to get later, but the kind of this field of dana was so strong, and the kids were so held in that container, and through the sincerity of their own practice, through their own commitment to the precepts which they took. And so we had this like intention setting ceremony that ended at, 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then we promised them a dance party as we came out of the silence. and this field of dana just like permeated, and it was, I was just like, I couldn't shut down the party, basically, is what happened. Like, not because they weren't listening, they were like holding their commitments quite beautifully, but it was like 2 o'clock, and you know, it was just, they're dancing, but like dancing in a way that you could just see the freedom created by the container, and it was like, yeah, we can't stop this now. And then I checked in again with myself at like 3, 4, 5. So, yeah, we it's a late night with the crew, and I just it reminds me of this slogan so much, because it was like just the kind of dignity of caring for people without an agenda, you know. Here's what Norman Fisher writes. Although we can enjoy the applause that we will probably receive for practicing it, practicing mind training, practice mind training not for the applause, but because we know it is right, we know it's necessary, and anyway, there is no choice. When people applaud us for our wonderful achievements, really what they're applauding is not us and not those achievements. They are applauding life. They are applauding goodness. They are applauding their own lives. They are applauding the human capacity to appreciate something wonderful. So it's good when they applaud. Let them applaud, and we will graciously accept it, knowing what their applause really means. So beautiful. I feel that so deeply when people tell me that something I've said or did was meaningful to them. It's not like I can't accept that or own it in a way, but it feels so much like what Norman's saying there. They're actually applauding goodness that they wouldn't even discern if it were not in them. You know? Like, we actually can't really see goodness in others in a way unless it actually resonates with something very deeply in us. And so another way of thinking about don't expect applause is not to turn it down, but to understand what it is. Understand what it is when people feel effusive, when people feel gratitude, when we feel gratitude. Yeah. Now, none of this is to say that to refuse applause, right? So it doesn't say refuse applause. It says don't expect applause, right? I've also done a decent amount of refusing, yeah. And so sometimes what happens, you can look in your own mind, is maybe somebody says something, you get some applause for something, but then that experience is so it stimulates some kind of part of us that we're ashamed of, or it stimulates some hunger for applause. It stimulates some kind of maybe narcissistic hunger in a way. And then we actually fail to have equanimity with that, and so we like dismiss it or try to minimize it, or we actually don't take it in, right? And so that's not what Norman is pointing to. We actually like have to develop equanimity with all the responses that unfold in our own heart when, for whatever reason, there is applause. And as we develop equanimity with that, it frees us up to honor what's really being applauded, which is, for lack of a better word, goodness itself. So let's just sit for a moment. Dwelling for a moment in the goodness within, the goodness of this room, the goodness of the path. May it be shared. May this goodness be shared. May this goodness be a cause for more joy and kindness, and less suffering and disconnection.